Someday I will be. I will be the most powerful Jedi ever. I promise you. I will even learn to stop people from dying.
Love won't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that.
Hello and welcome to Outer Stories, Inner Worlds, Outer Stories, where we look in depth and in with new light the inner villains that exist in stories, our favorite stories, and how they actually relate to our own inner villains. So we're using movies and pop culture as a method for self-development. And I am in the process of going through all 9 of the villains, which correlate to the 9 centers in human design, as well as the 9 Enneagram types. And we are today going to be looking at the 2 in the Enneagram, which is also known as the sacral center in human design, which is the vengeful martyr. And we're going to be looking at it through the lens of Anakin Skywalker. Not Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. And let me explain why that is exactly. So, what's important to recognize is that when we have a movie that has many, many different parts, just like we did with Elphaba Throp and The Wicked Witch of the West in Wicked, that we're going to be seeing, we're in the middle of that multi-part series, that we're going to be able to see the movement of 2 different villains going on. Elphaba Throp does the obedient critic, where the Wicked Witch of the West becomes more the vigilante and the righteous bully. This is a perfect example because there are 9 movies in the Anakin Skywalker saga, just the Skywalker saga, and we recognize that there's going to be a number of different arcs that are going on. But honestly, what we can see that a character of Anakin within the original canon of the 9, the prequels all the way through to the sequels, we're seeing that Anakin Skywalker is the vengeful martyr. As I mentioned, the 2, the sacral center, that source of energy, as well as the 2, which is the helper in the Enneagram. And let's get into it. Ultimately, the vengeful martyr has a number of different personas. It has the worst version, which is the pinnacle villain, just like with all of our villains, has the pinnacle villain. It's like that awful dark sun that everything is orbiting around. And then it has 3 different lesser versions of itself that show up: the successful antagonist, the wounded child, and the covert form. With the vengeful martyr, we see that the pinnacle villain is the vengeful martyr. The vengeful martyr is the one who says, I have done so much, I deserve to destroy and kill every single Padawan in the Jedi Temple. Spoilers if you haven't already seen that. Does that even count as a spoiler? I'm not sure. So it says, I have done so much for you that I deserve to destroy you. For some people, this shows up, and this is a classic form of codependence and a showing of the abandonment wound, just so everybody knows, as we're going to kind of fully fill out this and then relate it directly to Anakin. We recognize that the vengeful martyr is the part of the codependence that says that I'm going to make myself indispensable to every single person around me, and I'm making myself indispensable to everyone around me. I am there going to be owed love, and I will finally be enough. This is problematic for many different reasons. Obviously, there is a entire Codependence Anonymous. There's so many different things that help with the codependent. We see in the villain arcs that the 1 and the 2, the obedient critic and the vengeful martyr, both show different versions of codependence. But it's a really difficult thing to be able to be in this space. The pinnacle villain, being the vengeful martyr, is the place that they all go to when they're in stress or when they feel like they're really owed and they haven't been given the love that they deserve for everything that they've done. The successful antagonist in this arc is going to be the banker. And this is the person who is doing things that you never asked them to do, and then they think that you owe them. They have gone beyond the bounds of request and promise, which is one of our linguistic events where we're supposed to be interacting with another person. They've gone beyond those bounds, and they are just doing whatever it is that they want. And then they are putting debt in the bank in your relationship with them in order to be able to do this. If you are this person, you are the person who's always trying to think of something nice that you can do for another person. You're always trying to think about how you can help for another person, but you're not doing it without strings attached. I'm sick now, so I should be given the food, or I should be given the thing, something like that. And what you recognize is that as you move through this arc, you start to recognize that you don't help people because you want to be helped. You help people because you genuinely are nourishing yourself as you go along, and then you're able to help anybody that you want. But until then, everything is strings attached. So the successful antagonist is the banker. The second version of this is the wounded child, which is the abandoned. This is completely indicative of the abandonment wound, which is the main primal wound that occupies this entire arc. People who resonate with abandonment are going to find that there's very often, because we have all sorts of different wounds, we have all sorts of different ways to react to the same event. You and your siblings could all have a different reaction to something. Like if a parent dies, somebody might feel betrayed, somebody might feel rejected, somebody might feel abandoned, and some people might feel humiliated, or they might feel that it's a great injustice. Those are all the 5 primal wounds, plus mother wounds, father wounds, all that different kind of things. Everyone's going to have a different reaction to what these look like. And since we have all 9 of these centers, you may or may not resonate in abandonment. So the wounded child's going to feel abandoned, and they are going to feel as if they are not enough, they were not good enough to stay around for, and therefore their entire journey becomes the object of being enough for the person and the people that they love. The next one in this is the covert. The covert is the recovering in this version, and recovering is not meant to be, in this case, a reference to AA or anything along those lines, even though I mentioned Coda and Codependence Anonymous. The recovering is that you could also call this the restful. I did actually in the original version of the deck that I'm creating around all these villains. That's what I called it. But the covert is called this because of the fact that a natural cycle will happen with this arc, as it does with so many. You'll have somebody feeling abandoned, and so they say, okay, I'm not enough. So I need to create a strategy that says that I am enough. And my strategy is going to be making myself indispensable. So then I'm going to become the banker. And most of the time, I'm sitting in the banker accumulating credit for all the things that I've done and all the ways that I've helped other people. And when I start to feel that I have a little bit too much money in that bank, a little bit too much credit in that bank, and I'm feeling down or I'm feeling tired because I've overgiven, then I'm going to become the vengeful martyr. I'm going to say that I deserve everything because of the sacrifices I've made for people, even if they didn't ask for that help. And then after I've burnt down a lot of bridges, or I've maybe had some really bad difficulty with this, I'm going to go into the recovering. And the recovering is someone who is basically just like, oh no, I promise I've changed this cycle. Look, I'm resting. I'm taking care of myself. I'm not doing things for other people. But they're just in a dormant. They're just in a covert form of this, right? And so somebody who's in a long-term movement through this arc, they may feel like, oh, they're restful. Look, they're resting. They're doing everything they want. But as soon as they get energy, they're going to go back out and be the banker again. So how do we flip this? We flip this in the hero. The hero is the one who is going to be what I would call the selfish. And this is a strange way of saying it because so much in our society is completely supportive of rescuers. This is a rescuer arc that no one could ever imagine wanting to take things for yourself because, oh, you can't be selfish, right? You can't ask for something for yourself. And yet what we recognize is that the experience of finding your own boundaries and understanding who you are in relation to how much you give is what creates a circuit of giving and receiving. If you cannot receive, you cannot move out of this arc. You have to become selfish and receive in this arc in order to be able to truly move through it and recognize that there are things in here for you and that you want to do something for yourself. And this isn't just something that's done in reaction. This is a permanent state of being. The hero, as in all of our villains, the hero flips the polarity so that all of a sudden we're not resonating with the pinnacle villain and all of its baddies. We are in fact resonating with the legend. The legend of this arc is the nourisher. The nourisher understands drinking while they pour. They understand it fundamentally, and they may be ultimately giving in every single situation, but they no longer need to destroy things, and they do not take credit. They are not transactioning with abundance in their life and with their source of energy. They are freely giving it, and they are also freely receiving it. And so it's a totally different universe when all of a sudden you flip from this vengeful martyr into the legend of this form, which is the nourisher. So Anakin. How is Anakin doing this for us? How are we seeing that he is reflecting this entire arc? All right, so first, we're going to start with the wounded child, which is usually chronologically the beginning of how this all starts. The abandoned. As we know from the prequels, Shmi is Anakin's mother. And Shmi gives up Anakin in order so that he can go with Qui-Gon in order to be able to go to the Jedi Council and all the midichlorians. I know we like to say that midichlorians don't exist, but what we experience is that at the root of Anakin's story is a wound. It's not a wound from battle, it's from his abandonment. He was taken from his mother, even though he wanted to in some way, or he was interested in whatever it is, he was taken from his mother. He was barely trusted by the Jedi because everybody was uncertain of who he was or what he was, and he was silently trained under a system that preached detachment over belonging. To the Jedi, he was a prophecy. To himself, he was never enough. He did what he did in many ways to be able to be reunited with his mother, arguably, and yet, by the time that he was capable of doing it, he was too late.
I wasn't strong enough to save you, Mom. I miss you so much.
And so what we recognize is that there is an arc and a deep mother wound within Anakin that never allowed him to actually redeem and no longer be abandoned anymore. If anything, he feels as if he abandoned his mother. So he feels as if he's the bad guy who's in charge, who's actually been the one that was abandoned. He was abandoned and he was abandoning. And so we see that really, really strongly in Anakin when he goes back to try and rescue Shmi. We also see that she is relatively happy, even though she went to go work for the person who eventually she married. Anakin wants to assume that his stepfather is the one who was actually ultimately wrong. And what we see is that it is very strong for Anakin to want to believe this abandonment perspective, and that he failed his mother and that he was not enough to be able to do better. And you can see this as Emperor Palpatine is actually trying to really bring this home when he is going to the dark side and trying to push Anakin over to the dark side. Okay, so that's the wounded child. Now we're going to go over to the banker. The banker form, the successful antagonist of this, is it's look at all I've done for you. This is a direct quote from Anakin.
I won't lose you the way I lost my mother. I am becoming more powerful than any Jedi has ever dreamed of, and I'm doing it for you, to protect you.
He is constantly disobeying orders, saving lives. He's having bitter arguments with Obi-Wan. And the more he gave, the more he kept score. He began collecting moral debts. Every rule he broke and every life he saved, he was collecting on, look at that all I've done. His entire life became a receipt and a growing ledger of emotional credit. But he wasn't saving others anymore. He was buying love that he never felt that he truly had. He was buying his way into finally being recognized for the savior that he saw himself as. For everything that he gave up in order to become a Jedi and to abandon his mother, he's like, I deserve to be a Jedi. I don't want to be a Padawan anymore. I don't want to be an apprentice anymore. I deserve to be a Jedi because of everything that I did. And so everything that he did became adding to this emotional ledger that says that I am owed for everything that I did. Next, we're going to go to the pinnacle villain and the vengeful martyr. I already alluded to this earlier. The pinnacle version of when Anakin turns into a Sith, goes from a Jedi to a Sith, is when he chooses to listen to Emperor Palpatine, and he desires to save Padme. He desires to save his future children. He is so worried about being abandoned again that he lets himself move to the dark side.
I will do whatever you ask. Just help me save Padme's life. I can't live without her.
And he needs to prove himself. He needs to prove that he's enough, because Emperor Palpatine is always going to tell him that he's not enough. He needs to prove that he's enough. And in order to prove that he's enough, he then has to kill all of the Padawans in the Jedi Temple. And so what we see with this particular move is that Emperor Palpatine understands entirely what is going on with Anakin. He understands the nature of the wound that Anakin has of abandonment. He understands how deathly afraid Anakin is of losing Padme and losing his children. And so he uses the absolute whatever he can to stoke the fire within Anakin so that Anakin is going to be pushed over fully to the dark side. Because ultimately, when Anakin chooses to become the vengeful martyr, it is throughout the Revenge of the Sith, throughout episode 3, we see over and over and over again that he is trying to gain more and more power over abandonment. He's trying to make himself enough so that he is capable of being able to overcome the prophecy that's happening. And in a result to be enough, he pulls from the dark side as opposed to the balance that actually naturally exists within the Force. The abundance of the Force is everywhere. And if he were to be able to keep balanced and have his own interaction with the Force, he would recognize that it was okay, that he needed to let go of Padme no matter what happened. Obviously, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy in and of itself. And so what we recognize is the vengeful martyr is everything in the Revenge of the Sith in which Anakin goes from the Jedi to the dark side and becomes a Sith.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them! Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness!
Him becoming a Sith Lord is a very interesting take too, because in episodes 4, 5, and 6, we also recognize that he's never enough. So despite the fact that he has all of this power available to him, and we see him in a new persona, which is Darth Vader, which is more the obedient critic, who's always going to be underneath somebody. He's always very much so in the hierarchy. He's always still a Sith apprentice and never actually a Sith Lord himself. He's always Emperor Palpatine's student. We recognize that there is a key place in which the Emperor has taken Anakin and not actually fulfilled anything to make Anakin feel like he's enough, put him into this ulterior persona in which he can't actually move out of it until Luke models what it looks like. And that is where we see Darth Vader and Anakin finish his arc. So his arc says, I am going to move from the place of being abandoned, and I'm going to move to the place of abandoning. And instead of abandoning my son, I am actually going to defend my son. I am going to be enough in this moment because I am capable of doing this. And that's where we see Anakin and come back. At the end of Revenge of the Jedi, that's where we see Anakin fulfill his arc. That's where we see that he has a moment when he can choose to believe that he's not enough and believe that he needs to be underneath Emperor Palpatine, or he can choose to go over and actually help and be selfish ultimately. That's the funny thing. He is no longer the student, he chooses to be the selfish. When Luke and Vader have their final duel and Vader is hesitating as the Emperor tortures Luke, it is Luke who offers Anakin a mirror. In the end, Anakin didn't defeat Palpatine to save the galaxy, he did it to save his son. He did it to not abandon his son and to reclaim the choice that was his, not the Jedi's and not the Sith's. He chose to drink while he poured. He chose to be a father in that moment and to not abandon his child when his child needed him the most. He chose in that moment to become the selfish. He was no longer living his life in order to be enough for other people. He chose to be enough by the choice that he made to take his own self-interest, which was to save his son, and do something about it. And so what we recognize that moving into the legend part of Anakin all happens within those last couple of minutes of Revenge of the Jedi. Anakin says, tell your sister you were right, that there was good in me, that I was enough. And in that moment, Anakin becomes something that the Jedi never taught him to be, which was not just a warrior and not just the chosen one. He became a nourisher. He gave without needing repayment. He died in peace, not in power and not in repayment. He broke the cycle of the transactional part that said that I deserve this or I don't deserve that. And he was able to actually move into a new choice. And he was able to give of himself, but give him of himself in a way that actually redeemed him ultimately. Abundance at last flowed through giving and receiving in that moment, and that is how we see Anakin come to his full fruition so that he can become a Force ghost and he can watch the lovely party that happens at the end of Revenge of the Jedi. Now we're going to move on to the recovering form, which we don't see a lot of, especially because of the fact that there's a lot of movement and there's also a fair number of kind of weakness in story, if I could say that happens in the prequels to really show the recovering aspect of Anakin. We sometimes see it with Vader when he's alone in his chamber, he's silent, he isn't always raging. Much of the time he's simply withdrawn, exhausted, haunted, broken. He exists in cycles of silent suffering and explosive violence, which is very, very indicative of both the righteous bully and the obedient critic and the vengeful martyr, just to be a little bit confusing there. So the overextension that he does in this case is kind of his example of the recovering. It's like, I'm going to do this thing and then I have to recover. It's like, I'm going to build the Death Star, it's going to blow up, and then there's going to be a period of quiet, and then I'm going to come back. And so you don't see the recovering as much. I feel like the recovering is not really that interesting in story, so you may not see it. But if you know the cycle in yourself, you are going to know what that looks like in yourself. All right, so here we are at the end of this telling of Anakin's arc through the vengeful martyr and how Anakin is ultimately very codependent, has a lot of inner wounds, has a lot of movement, and how we see him go through his full redemption from the ultimate villain of Darth Vader to all the way through to the end of Revenge of the Jedi, where he is just in a great place. He's dead, but he's in a great place. So if you like this, if you want to hear more, if you disagree, please leave comments. Anything that you do can help grow the channel. I've gotten a lot of great feedback that people like everything, but obviously we're still a very small channel. So if you can share it, comment, like, interact in any way that you can, it would be amazing and wonderfully helpful. So thank you so much and have a great day.